Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kerry, I really appreciate your thoughtful opening statement. I appreciate your thoughtful response to these questions. I have a great deal of respect for your level of experience, your depth of knowledge in these areas, and I would have enjoyed working with you as a member of the committee. I'm going to enjoy working with you as Secretary of State, and I mean that in all sincerity. I want to have a very close working relationship. These are, as you said in your opening statement, these are complex issues. These are dangerous times. I certainly grew up hoping that maxim of politics ends at the water's edge was actually true. I'm not sure it ever was, but I think it's something we can aspire to. I truly believe we share the same goals. We want a secure America. We want a prosperous America. Now, I think that starts being open and honest with each other. So I hate to go back to yesterday's news, but I think this is important. Yesterday when I was asking, I thought, a relatively simple question, I realized being persistent, Secretary Clinton's reaction was, and I quote, "What difference at this point does it make?" Trying to get to the truth of the matter in Benghazi, and I'd run out of time, so I didn't really have a chance to answer the question. But let me quick answer it. I'd like to get your reaction. I think it makes a big difference. I think it matters a great deal that the American people get the truth. I think they have the right to be told the truth. I think they have the right to know what happens. And I think it makes a big difference whether or not the American people have the confidence that the President and the administration is being truthful with them. So I guess my question is, do you agree with that point? Are you willing to work with me, or do you basically kind of agree with Hillary Clinton that that's kind of yesterday's news and let's move on?
Well, Senator, if you're trying to get some daylight between me and Secretary Clinton, that's not going to happen here today on that score. But I think you're not. I think you're talking past each other. I don't think that. Could be. I don't think that was the question. I think that if your question is, should the American people get the truth and does it matter, Hillary Clinton would say yes, and I say yes. But that's not what I think she was referring to. I think what she was referring to was sort of the question of the sequencing and the timing of how particular information came in with respect to the talking points and the public statements that were made. And there was a difference of opinion in my judgment as to how you saw that versus how she saw it.
The point I was making is we could have avoided all this controversy, sure, this doubt for a couple of weeks by just making a couple phone calls. So let me ask you, as Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, did you make any phone calls to those evacuees? Did you ascertain whether there was a protest or not? Early on.
Again, I'm not. I don't want to go back and relitigate the events that took place. Yes, I made phone calls. I was in constant touch with the State Department. I was talking to Undersecretary Nides and others immediately, and we were involved in what was happening.
How soon did you know there were no protests? I mean, because it's pretty obvious by the Accountability Review Board report that there were no protests. I mean, do you know that pretty immediately?
Senator, it's the intel that I got and that I was told by people was that there were no protests there were no protests in Benghazi, but that there had been protests in Cairo.
And we understood that. But that wasn't the issue. It was really were there protests in Benghazi.
Yeah, but I don't think...
Is there a reason that we wouldn't have those Department of State officials, those security people testifying before us so we can find out who knew what when? I mean, actually get to the bottom of that?
There's no reason down the road, I would assume, but for the moment, I know that there is an FBI investigation going on because I personally called the FBI director and was debriefed by him and was told that they're making progress and that some things, may or may not be ripe to take place in the not too distant future.
Okay, well, will you work with me then on an ongoing basis then so we can get that behind us so we can find out what actually happened? Then we can move beyond that. I mean, can you just make that commitment to me?
Well, I think, Senator, in all fairness, I think we do know what happened. I think that it is very clear. Were you at the briefing with the tapes?
No.
Well, there was a briefing with tapes, which we all saw, those of us who went to it, which made it crystal clear. We sat for several hours with our intel folks who described to us precisely what we were seeing. We saw all of the events unfold. We had a very complete and detailed description.
Yes, but we know what happened in Benghazi now because we have the reports. What we don't know is why we were misled. But again, I'm just looking to make sure that you as Secretary of State will work with me so we actually do find out what the administration knew, how they misled the American public.
Senator, in fairness, I don't want the American people to be left with a misimpression here. When you say why we were misled, that implies an intent to actually mislead you somehow. I think that there was a description of a variance in talking points. I don't know why that happened, but there was a description of that.
And all I'm asking, will you help us get to the bottom of why that happened? And then we can move on. I just want to get that behind us. I just want that commitment.
The State Department will continue to cooperate as it has in every respect to any request of this committee or to any committee of relevant jurisdiction.
Great, and I appreciate that commitment. I just want to go back to, you said foreign policy is economic policy. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we don't have the luxury of deciding whether we want to compete in a global economy. We must compete. And, I agree with Senator Corker. Maybe you should have been, up for an economic position here. But will you utilize your position, Secretary of State, to try and get the President to work with us to solve the debt and deficit issue? Because this is a matter of prioritizing of spending. I mean, I just don't think we can continue to tax the American economy. We need economic growth, but it's about prioritizing spending. And I'm a fiscal conservative that believes that foreign aid can be extremely useful, but we have to get our spending under control. We utilize your position as Secretary of State to encourage the President to work with us in good faith to solve the debt and deficit issue.
Well, Senator, I spent 6 months, I guess it was, or 5 months as a member of the Super Committee. And I put an enormous amount of energy and hoped that we would be able to get the big bargain, grand deal. I'm not here to go through all the details why we didn't, but there was a very hardline, non-negotiating position that prevented us from being able to come to an agreement, which incidentally, we just came to. But we came to it with far less on the table and far less accomplished than we would have had if we'd come to that agreement 6 months ago or a year ago. So my hope is, yes, I certainly will weigh in on that to the degree that it has an impact on my ability to do my job and the ability of the State Department to be able to do its job. We cannot reduce the funding for some of these initiatives that we are engaged in without great cost to our ability to be able to help American business, help create jobs, and help strengthen our security in the world. So it's in my interest to get this budget effort resolved. Even though I'll be negotiating other things, I'll certainly weigh in with anybody who will listen with respect to the imperative of getting it done. But it requires some compromise and some reasonableness on everybody's part.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, I really do look forward to working closely with you. Thanks.
Thank you.